Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Crypto News Podcast. We're buzzing as always. And today our guest is coming in hot from lovely Berlin, Germany, on the bucket list. Gotta go there. Today we have the founder and CEO of KILT Protocol, Mr. Ingo Rübe, a blockchain identity protocol for issuing self-sovereign and verifiable credentials. Ingo and his team are in Berlin and develop enterprise and consumer services built on KILT, which protect digital identity across financial services and accounting, healthcare, IoT, media, energy, and gaming. You name it, they are there. Earlier in his career, he was the CTO of Hubert Burda Media and also served on the board of directors of the Drupal Association. Been waiting for this one for a while. We finally got him on. Ingo, welcome to the show, man. Pumped to have you on.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. Thank you.
Super pumped. This was a while, man. But this was a long time coming and it comes at a perfect time too. It seems like the general population is the Gen Pop, as we like to call them, is really finally hammering down and perhaps is finally a little horny for security and digital identification. And you and the team are moving and grooving in that. What sort of made you such a fan? What got you so into this? Was there like an aha moment or a light bulb moment, or was it just a concession of different events? Like, what got you into privacy and digital identification?
Yeah, the thing was actually that we started this company funded by industry, by Hubert Burda Media, where I worked before as a CTO. And I was going to go do something in blockchain. I told them and they said, oh, can we actually jump on the boat and have some shares in the company? We will give you some money for that. And I said, yeah, why not? Because that was so much easier than raising money. And then actually we sat there with the team and some money, and the question came up, actually, what can we do now? So what would we do? What would you do if you have some money and you are supposed to do something, or you want to do something in blockchain? And coming from industry, I was thinking, okay, what will actually be the first thing that is going to be adopted from the blockchain by the industry? So what is needed most? And then we were looking at different topics like advertising here and you name it, different things. And we always came around the problem, okay, you should do that with a blockchain, but actually you can't because the identity problem on blockchain isn't solved. And then we said, okay, at one point we said, okay, probably we have to solve the identity problem. And then we sat down and said, okay, this is what we do. So this is all about identity, and all the others can then use it and build beautiful things on top of that.
So what is the identity problem? You brought it up a couple of times in your opener there. What exactly is that?
So the identity problem is that in blockchain, you normally can't really identify people, and which is also actually meant to be like that, right? But if you want to work with industry, then you have to identify things, still keeping a bit of privacy in there. So the digital identity in the internet as such is not solved. Because it is solved in the physical world. In the physical world, you have identity. You have the two types of things which together constitute identity. One is the identifier, which is, for example, your face or your fingerprint or your signature. So these are things which you make yourself and which are not given to you by a government, which are not given to you by a company. So this is totally decentralized in the physical world. So you have, for example, fingerprints, right? No one gave you the fingerprint. But this is just identification, right? So this is how you identify people. This is still not identity, right? It's just identification. And if you want to make it identity, then you have to add verifiable credentials to that. So what's a verifiable credential? This is, for example, your passport, your driver's license, your student card, many things, the keys to your office, all these things are verifiable credentials. And they are normally issued by trusted entities, which also have an identity, of course, so that you can actually find out which trusted entity this is. And they issue those credentials to identifiers. So when I have, for example, a passport, there's a picture of my face in. So this is how the identifier and the credential are linked together. And the cool thing about those physical verifiable credentials is that there are actually in my pocket, right? I control them 100%. They're not controlled by the government. They're not controlled by a company or something. They're just controlled by me. I decide who I show this thing to. And
interesting.
And when I show the thing, this is actually what we call an identity transaction, then the issuer of the credential is not involved, which gives you a lot of privacy. Right? So if I use my driver's license to buy a bottle of whiskey, then the government, which gave me the driver's license, will never find out that I bought a bottle of whiskey, which is a great piece of privacy for me. And it's also very scalable and has lots of other nice features. And this thing was never built in the internet. In the internet, we have very centralized identity, which is in some big American companies like Google and Facebook. This is where your internet identity lives. They have your identifier, which is username, password, or an entry in the database. They also have your verifiable credentials, which is all the data that they collect about you. But they can decide at any given point that they just delete your identity, which is not possible with the physical identity, because no one's going to delete your face or your fingerprint or your signature, right? It's still there. So in the internet, you don't control your data, and in the physical world, you do control your data. So actually, with the internet, we made a huge step back in privacy and also in functionality. And this is what we want to change with KILT Protocol. So this is possible now as we have decentralized technology. We have blockchains. So in blockchains, we can do these things. And we just use the technology, which is now invented since 2011 or something, to solve the identity problem that the internet had from the beginning.
100 and almost 90 episodes. And this is easily one of the just most in-your-face and no-brainer use cases for a crypto company that I've ever heard of. This is bananas. Ingo, how do you get governments to say yes to this, right? Because I feel like that's a huge piece of the puzzle. You need them on board in order to make this whole parade happen. How do you get them on board?
Actually, you don't need them, because they are still, so the governments are very much in the physical world still, right? So they still issue paper documents or plastic documents and stuff like that. And then we have a different layer on top of that, which is called the KYC companies. So there's companies which actually have trust, and they can issue KYC credentials. So we are just supplying a technology for companies which are, if you want to do so, KYC is not the only use case for digital identity, right? There's many others, but KYC is of course an important one. So if you want to do KYC with such a system, you use the government KYC, because this is normally accepted by banks and whoever you want to interact with. And you take your credentials, which you have in your pocket, right? Like your driver's license, your passport, whatever you need to do your KYC, and you waive it a little bit and all that stuff. And then from the KYC company, which did this process with you, you get a verifiable credential, which is a digital version of your driver's license, your passport, or whatever you used. And you can store that on your computer. And then the question is, who's going to try? And they are signing it, right? It's not only that you have it, it's also linked to your DIDs, basically linked to your digital face. And then you can show it to someone. And if this someone is going to accept it, very much depends on the trust of the company which did the KYC. So if you have a huge company in there, which is trusted by basically governments and all that, then these KYC credentials will be trusted by anyone. If I issue you a KYC credential, then probably no one's going to trust that. So it's just it's a question of how do we get the trusted companies in there, and not a question of how do we get the governments in there. Because the governments, if we tried that actually in the beginning of when we started the company, we were very much into German and European policy making, and we basically got to know everyone from policy making there, and that was a huge waste of time, because they are
why
they are thinking in very different ways. If you tell a guy from the government, actually, it would be nice that people own their faces. And then they said, that's nice. And we recognize that this is the case in the physical world, but in the digital world, it's so nice that Facebook has that. Can't we be the Facebook? And then we say, basically, maybe you can, but that wouldn't solve the problem, right? Because then the government could actually delete your identity. And if the government can delete your identity, this is something that should not happen. Not because we don't trust the government. We are living in a democratic world and all is totally nice. But governments and data, they have a very special relationship. Because when I give data and the power to use the data or even to delete the data to a government, I also automatically give it to all the future governments because the data doesn't vanish, but governments do. So if I give to the German government, which is nice government, I say, you can control my DID, basically my decentralized identifier. I would even trust them that they don't do anything bad with it. But it could be that in 4 or 8 years or so, another government comes up and they are looking for people, I don't know, with glasses, and they don't like them and they just shut them off, right? And then I lose my digital identity, which will be in 10 years or so much more worth, much more valuable than the physical identity. So giving the power to use those things to a government is very, very complicated. But governments always think, okay, we've seen this Facebook model. Can we not do it like that? And then the conversation actually ends in nothing.
Could you imagine the gov trying to make a Facebook? Come on. You know how quick they had to move? Do you know, what's their classic motto? Move fast and break things? Yeah, that's that's the exact opposite of the gov. The gov is move slow and
exactly. They should actually adopt things like DIDs and so on, and decentralized identifiers and verifiable credentials. And we see some movements in this direction also in Asia, which is much faster moving than Europe, for example. But in Europe, we don't see that, unfortunately. So for us, it was a very big waste of time actually talking to those guys for years. And then we looked at it and said, actually, identity is not going to come from top down. It's going to come bottom up. Because who's the first adopters? The first adopters are, of course, the blockchain people, because it's easiest for them. But then comes gamers probably, because they are interested in identity as well, because they want to they want to basically know not really which person they are playing with, but so they don't need your street address, but they need your Twitter account or your Discord account to find out who you actually are, what's your reputation around that. So and on top of that, probably some kind of e-commerce is emerging, and then there's things which are happening in the industry, right? So industry is coming first, and then maybe there's metaverses we will see. But if we have something like that, then money is made in this virtual worlds, and when there's money made, then the government comes in and says, actually, where's my taxes? And then they start adopting it. So it's not going the way that the government first says, we all want DIDs, we use KILT, and then it trickles down. It's more like it's coming up from the grassroots movements, actually. And then at one point, it gets so important that governments have to jump on it. Yeah,
they won't have a choice. That's very well said. I want to go back to Asia and more specifically China for a second. They are, and again, I've been to India, I've not been to China, so I haven't seen how far ahead they are. I've obviously seen the videos, a bunch of them on YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, you name it. And I have friends who've gone and have sent me the videos firsthand. Ingo, it is scary, the amount of control over your identity that they have in China. Can you tell any stories or can you speak to this in any regard? Because from what I've seen, it is absolute bonkers based on your fingerprints, your facial ID everywhere. They got it all.
Yeah, this is exactly what I meant. So they basically control your identity, right? And if they control your identity, then they can also control all the verifiable credentials you have on top of that. And they can also self-issue them, basically. So this is the Facebook case in mind. So what you have with Facebook, what Facebook is doing as a business model, China is basically doing as a governance model. So it's the same thing. So China is pretty successful in copying the Facebook idea of collecting all the data, computing it together, making AI on top of it, and so on. So they do exactly what Facebook does, but Facebook does that commercially, which is much less dangerous than if the government does that, because Facebook doesn't control the police, the government does, right? That's the big difference.
Have you been there? Have you seen it firsthand?
No, I've not been there, no.
Any interest? as a big ID guy?
I don't like it from here, and I probably wouldn't like it when I'm there. So I wouldn't go there.
I don't know. Sometimes you just gotta, you can't knock it till you try it. You gotta test it out.
Yeah, but we will first have to figure out the COVID situation there, probably.
Oh, 100%. Before the show, you and I were talking a little bit about EU's digital identity program. I had no clue about this until you brought it up. I'd love to throw the ball over to your court if you just give us a little primer about what's happening and how it most likely, realistically, will not work out.
Yeah, so what the Europeans call that eIDAS 2. So eIDAS is a pretty old standard, which is it a standard now? It's a regulation which came from the EU and which basically said if you want to store any personal data, then you have to secure it, which is not the worst idea, right? So that you don't, if you would be able to break into something, then it should be somehow secure. So data centers are not per se a bad thing. But then over the last 10 years, actually, the science actually went a little bit further down the road and noticed actually, if you want to have real security, you do that with decentralization. This is what we have the blockchains from. So blockchains are much more secure actually than a centralized system, because a centralized system can always be broken into, and the blockchain is very hard to break into because it's decentralized. So actually we know that for about 10 years now. eIDAS wasn't moving at all, and it was actually not allowing a lot of things. So if I want to build something in Germany which is government related, it always has to be compatible with eIDAS. So it says, okay, your blockchain has to run in a data center, which is basically exactly what a blockchain does not do. So it's very hard to get into governmental things with blockchain. So that was always very, very disturbing. Of course, you can just say, well, you don't work with those guys, and then you can make blockchains, no problem. But now eIDAS was looked at a little bit, and then there's this decentralization thing, and they thought about identity, and identity sounds so much better when it's decentralized. So they said, okay, we make a new version of it and say personal data, which is actually should be owned by the people, because the passport is owned by the person. That would be nice if it would be the same in the digital world, which is a great step, actually. So very, very positive to see. So they say, okay, you can have a digital passport, and this digital passport is in your digital wallet, and you can show it to anyone, and we're not going to track it. But then they say the identifier, unfortunately, which is your face, your fingerprint, this is issued by the government again. And so it basically also says, okay, if we want to delete your identity, we can delete your identity, no matter how many credentials you actually collected. And of course, then the wallet where you have the stuff, it can be open source, it can be closed source, we don't know, but it's probably going to come from a big company, and it's probably being closed source. So would you use a wallet which is closed source? I wouldn't, because there can be some trapdoors in there, right? It could be that that somehow they can manipulate the credentials. So it's all very, very half-baked and doesn't make a very good impression. And it is actually moving in the wrong direction, because apparently the government lobbyists were very strong on, but we have to have this Facebook moment, right? We have to somehow control the identifier. And as long as they don't understand that the identifier is not controlled by government, but it has to be controlled by the individual, this thing is miserably going to fail. But we're going to see a lot of money being pumped into that in the next couple of years before it fails.
What can we do to let the government, and more specifically the decision makers, know that it is truly the people who will decide if this works or not, and not them? Like, is there even a roadmap? Like, is there a secret sauce, or is it just they're going to have to figure it out for themselves?
I would just say do good work on the grassroots, on the grassroots level. Get the industry in, because industry is understanding it. So industry is so much quicker in thinking than governments are. So and right. Industry in the end wins. So what we do is we make industrial corporations. So we cooperate with big industry, small industry, any type of industry. They always understand the case. They always understand that identity has to be decentralized. it's very easy to get to them, to start working with them. And then this is building an ecosystem. And at one point, governments will understand. And I think it's not the right way to actually go to your government and tell them you're wrong, because we tried that. And they will not listen probably because they just want to have this, because they also have consultants, right? They live from consultants, and those consultants have been trained in the platform area of Facebook. And every consultant, every business consultant that you meet will probably tell you when you are in a CEO or a governmental high position, will tell you, copy Facebook, you'll be happy. And this is what they learned the last 10 years. So we are not in the position to go there and say they were wrong, right? They will find out after a while, but they will find out by industry using a different way or going a different route, because then they say, actually, what's happening there? Those people are pretty happy too. So maybe we should be like that. But it's not going to happen because we have great ideas. There's this beautiful technology. Please use that. That's not going to happen.
Ingo, you're on a roll here. Folks, got to take a quick break. Got to give a massive shout out to our sponsor, the show, Prime XBT. And when we get back, we're going to take a deep dive into KILT, what they're doing with Polkadot, the Polkadot Alliance, and where other main benefits and use cases are for digital identification. But before we get to that, got to give a huge shout out to our sponsor of the show, and that is Prime XBT. We love Prime XBT over here at Crypto News. Longtime friend, longtime partner, and we've all been using it for an absolute hot minute as they offer a robust trading system for both beginners and professional traders. It doesn't matter if you're a rookie or a vet, you can easily design and customize your layouts and widgets to best fit your trading style. Prime XBT is also offering an exclusive promotion for listeners of the Crypto News podcast. The promo code is Crypto News 50. Again, that is Crypto News 50, all one word, to receive 50% of your deposit credited to your trading account. Again, Crypto News 50, all one word, to receive 50% of your deposit credited to your trading account. Now back to the show with Ingo. Ingo, let's jump into KILT here. Let's go for a nice little deep dive. You started off and gave us a lovely primer on the ins and outs of privacy, digital identity, identification 101, you name it, you've done it. Let's get into KILT now. You sort of talked about why you started KILT, obviously a very front of mind and in your face use case that the general pop will need to use sooner rather than later. I want to know what KILT offers in terms of identity solutions, the actual products and services themselves, and how do they work? Ball's in your court. What do you got for me?
So first and foremost, we see ourselves as an infrastructure layer. So what we do, we are on the level where TCP, IP, or HTTP or something like that is. So use the stuff, build great things on it, and become rich. This is our story, right? This is our narrative. So we are not primarily targeting the end user. We are primarily targeting the developer. So any cool development team can build great identity applications on top of KILT without, of course, paying because it's all open source. So this is what we provide. So we're an infrastructure provider. Of course, we have built a couple of applications with a subsidiary that you can already use so that you can see the power of the IDs and how that works. So, for example, there's a beautiful application, I would say, which is called Social KYC, which is a service where you can get your social media accounts credentialed. So it's actually checking if you own this Twitter account, this Discord account, and so on, and you get a credential for that. And then you can, for example, services can use that so that you can say you can log in with your Twitter credential or your Discord credential, and then you can send those credentials from your digital wallet to the services, and you have a nice login without passwords and all that stuff. So that would be, that's an interesting thing. Of course, I was mentioning the wallet. Of course, we have an identity wallet, it's called Sporan, which you can download, where you can store your digital identity. It's creating DIDs on your computer because those DIDs have to be created on your computer. They're not given to you by us or by a company or something, right? They are given to you by yourself, so you create them there. You can also receive credentials, for example, from Social KYC, and you can store them there. You can move them, you can back them up, you can send them to other applications. So Sporan is, I think, a very key thing that we built. There's plenty of others actually. So if you look into how Web 2 actually managed to do signing of documents, there's one big company which comes to mind. I don't want to say the name now, but it's always a little bit strange if you work with those guys, right? Because the first thing that you do with your possibly secret document is you upload to a server of a company that you really know. And the second thing is that you actually sign this with your email address, and email addresses can actually be very, very easily spoofed. And so there's actually not very much security in there, but a lot of real estate things are happening exactly with this thing. So this is what we thought actually could be done much better with DIDs, and there should be a free solution for that. And we also built this. It's called DID-Sign, so DID sign in one word, .io, where you can actually use your DID to sign documents and also timestamp them, for example, and add verifiable credentials to them, so that the person who sees your signature actually can make sure that this signature is coming from you and also knows who you are on the internet. So this is really a powerful system. And there's some other things which we built there, but these are small applications. I think what's much bigger is the applications that other people build. And so this is going to be much more important. So these things just start this year. So you will see some big companies from the accounting world, from the publishing world, from the healthcare world, coming out with applications on top of KILT. Some early next year already. So these things are coming up, but they're not coming from us, right? We are just the infrastructure provider, and other people on top of that say, actually, this is a cool business model, or I have a great idea for a business model. Let's do this KYC thing, for example. And then big company steps in and says, actually, so many people need reusable KYC, which they don't do for one thing, but for many different occasions. So that can actually be charged with a lot of money, and there's a lot of need for it. So it's a huge business case. Which technology do we build it on? Of course, KILT. So this is great for us because they're using us, but it's also great for them because they're getting rich.
That's a massive play right there. Literally, just like you said, being the infrastructure level of digital identity, that is absolutely massive. Ingo, you guys have been buzzing and obviously continuing to build in the bear market. You and the team are biddlers at heart. There's no doubt there. You guys are also one of the founding fellows of the recently announced Polkadot Alliance. I heard about this. I saw it on Twitter. I took a little small dive. I don't know a whole lot about it. I'd love to know, why was it created? Who else is involved? What are your goals? What's the whole deal with the Polkadot Alliance?
So the idea of Polkadot Alliance was, so when you look at different ecosystems right now in the blockchain world, especially those around the so-called Ethereum killers, right? When you look around that, you will find that not all of them are truly decentralized. And I think that what Polkadot is doing for quite a while is not putting too much money into marketing, but putting a lot of effort actually in decentralization. And this is what we very much believe in, because it's when we do blockchain, we should actually do blockchain in a really decentralized way. Otherwise, it doesn't really make sense, because anything which is not decentralized can also be done by a database, and databases are so much cheaper and so much easier than blockchains. So probably in the long run, Polkadot is going to be a really important player. And I think it's important already, but it's going to get more important. And it's getting more important because of the real decentralization, because we have seen in recent months, we have seen what happens in blockchain or in the blockchain ecosystem when there's centralized players. Not saying any names, but sometimes it really goes wrong. So if you mix it with a little bit of greed and irresponsibility, I don't know. So being irresponsible, then actually it's bound to crash. And so as we see a lot of people moving out their funds from centralized exchanges to decentralized exchanges now, actually the same thing is probably going to happen in many different ways. So Polkadot always aims to be really decentralized, and KILT does too. And we are thinking about many different things which can be decentralized on top of the system. So one of the issues that we had in basically last year in the bull market was that the name Polkadot was actually misused by some projects, because you could just say Polka something and then go to investors and just raise a lot of money, even though you were not building anything, or you were building something on Ethereum or so. And that is not nice, because it's damaging the name. And then we also found some people who actually really don't stick to the rules how open source software should be used. So people should be credited. So of course you can use the software from Sporon, right? So the software Sporon, if you want to build an identity wallet, go ahead, use Sporon. But it would be nice if you mention us, if you do that, right? And some people just didn't do that. They were just, and this is then stealing somehow, because they pretend that this was their idea. And
right.
And these things were really a little bit annoying. And so what can you do against it when you are a decentralized system? So how can you do it in a decentralized way? And this is what we try with the Polkadot Alliance, that we try to put a decentralized on-chain organization where some projects are represented. So the founders are now represented, but anyone else can join, which actually look at these things and have blacklists and whitelists of projects and people and so on, so that people can do the research on if a project is actually part of this ecosystem or not. So this is what we're trying. And of course, you could do this as a legal entity, but we don't want to, right? We want to have it on chain, and Polkadot has the possibility to build those things as a common good parachain, which is a fantastic idea.
So all the, obviously you're biased because you guys are working with them so closely, but all that aside, your long-term Polkadot, you think that it's got a lot of growth ahead, potentially?
I would say so, yes, because the technology is really far, far ahead of a lot of other things. I think everything else that we see in the space, and technology is not going to win of its own, right? You also have to talk about it.
Right.
And Polkadot is definitely not best in talking about it. But what we have seen, or what we do see, is that Polkadot attracts the biggest amount of developers in the whole ecosystem. Of course, Ethereum is bigger, right? So if you cut out
after
Ethereum,
ETH, yeah.
After Ethereum, it's the second biggest. And that means that a lot of people understood actually that this technology is great, and the ecosystem is worth as much as the projects which build on it, right? Because Polkadot itself is just an infrastructure for building projects. And so now it's not only we that are here, there's many others, and they're getting more every day. And if some of these projects actually do really valuable things, then Polkadot becomes more valuable, and then more developers come in, and then more use cases show up. And if projects like us are going for industrial adoption, then also more and more industry actually comes in. And this has, I think, a great chance, because it is not driven by I would say greed or something, or shilling something. It's driven by technologies. It's just a bunch of technologists who want to build the perfect blockchain infrastructure, and I think that's sometimes it's a little bit annoying, because it's not loud enough. Of course, we would like to have it louder sometimes, but in the end, we understand it's probably the right way, because it's good to go the right way. But you see that not in bull markets. In the bull markets, everyone else looks maybe better from time to time. But in a bear market, when these things like SPF and all that stuff happens, you see where centralization, we're not following the true rules of decentralization and of open source. If you don't follow those rules, where it actually ends up. And I think in the long run, decentralization is going to win, and this is what Polkadot is very much standing for.
Great points there. I love it too. It's the one thing you brought up that I find very interesting is their lack of marketing, which is really true now. And I've always, it's been sort of back of mind, never front of mind, but after you bring it up a couple of times, you're so right about that. They really don't hammer home a lot of the value props like a lot of the other chains after Ethereum on the chart do. Just very thought-provoking there. I want to talk about CBDCs, central bank digital currencies.
Heard about that.
Yeah. Canada, what was it? I want to say it was 3 days ago, or by the time this episode will air mid to late December, and we're recording mid-December here. But Canada even released something that early 2023, the Gov and the Canadian Fed are going to test the consumer sentiment levels for a digital currency. It's like, I feel like that is just beyond nonsensical, because the Gen Pop probably doesn't have a good enough idea of the pros and cons and the value props and the negative aspects of a CBDC. And I feel like crypto people, they're not even going to go ask. To me, it just seems absolutely crazy. How quick do you think these will get rolled out? And how bad will it be when they get rolled out?
I think that actually, where's the big difference between the CBDC and the money we have right now? Because actually it is very digital. So I can use my plastic card to pay with it. It's automatically deducted from my account. I have internet access to my account. I can see it, how much was deducted. Actually, it's very digital already. So the difference between the CBDC and the currency we have right now is actually that you can make micropayments. That's the only thing that comes on top. Right, you can say we're paying 1/100th part of a penny for something, and this is good for industry. So if they want to do that, they can do that. I think that has nothing to do with blockchain, because it is central bank digital currency. So there's nothing decentralized in there. It's not a cryptocurrency in a way. It's more like a clone or an avatar of the Canadian dollar, of the euro, or what you have. So it's going to be the same thing. I've been in a working group on CBDC for Europe, and that was a very lengthy discussion, especially with lots of people from science. And so pegging is a huge problem. How secure is it going to be? Because if it's issued by the central bank, then it's even more centralized than the euros or the whatever you have. Because those euros are basically they are in banks, and there's more than one bank, so it's partly decentralized or distributed at least. If you put this all on one account, basically in one computer, in the end, then it's a nice honeypot for hackers to actually steal all the money. So there's lots of issues with CBDCs. I don't see them in the next couple of years, because there's definitely a need from industry, because they want micropayments. But maybe we find another way to do micropayments without CBDC, because I think that's the only actual need for it, because otherwise we have CBDCs already.
I get where you're coming from there, but I think the biggest difference with CBDCs in our current sort of digital banking system, with credit cards and electronic transfers and the Venmos and Zells and all that kind of stuff, is sort of the one flick of a switch to gas everything immediately. You know what I mean? Like right now, if someone, if Trudeau wanted to deplatform me for whatever reason, not social media, but economic wise, personal bank, business bank, more where that came from, blah, 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 like credit cards, MasterCard, Visa, multiple Amexes, so on and so forth. I feel like it's not just a one switch, right? Whereas with the CBDC, it almost would be. I feel like that's where it gets scary.
This is one of the, there's many points where the CBDC is not a good idea. One of them is the identity problem, apparently. So your bank account is somehow a credential, which is linked to your DID, to your decentralized identifier. If this is centralized again, then you are in big trouble, because someone can just take your money off and switch you off, and then you can't pay anything anymore. So this is also very dangerous, and centralized things are normally dangerous. And if they are with the government, then it's more than dangerous. But there's also other people who are actually working against that. So ask the banks if they like the idea. They hate it, because they are basically losing their jobs then, right? So
huge.
They have huge lobbies. So it's going to be really complicated to have that. So I don't think there's a huge future in that. And I know that China made some kind of a CBDC, but you're not hearing a lot from that anymore over the last years. So apparently the need for that is rather rather low. The risk behind it is rather high in many different ways for the consumer, but also technology-wise. And so maybe it's not such a great idea.
Ingo, you've been on fire all epi, bro. We are getting tight for time. And this has been a treat. Last segment, and then we'll wrap up. Hot Take Factory. Let's put our shit kicking boots on. Let's jump in. Give me an Ingo hot take. I feel like you got a couple. I feel like you have more than a couple. You've been buzzing. Something that perhaps only Ingo believes in that most people don't can be food, sports, politics, geo, space, AI, crypto, you name it, anything. Give me a couple Ingo hot takes.
So actually, if you mention it, I believe in food. Not only that I like to eat food, but I think that food is probably one of the biggest topics that we will have in the next and upcoming years, because people are very much concerned about what they eat and where it comes from. And this is something where technology is in the very baby steps, I would say. So there's a lot of things to do in supply chain, in fair trade, in stuff like that. And because people really are interested in what they actually consume. And this wasn't that way like 30 years ago. Yeah? When I was like 20, I wasn't very much interested in what I eat. Well, it was good if I wasn't hungry after that. But now people are much more concerned, and technology and technology in food production and also in supply chains in food hasn't picked that up. And I was just speaking this morning with a new, I don't know, it's probably an accelerator for food companies, which is going to happen and which is going to be built here in Berlin. And we're going to get involved there because I find this topic absolutely hot. And there's hundreds or so. They bought a huge house, actually. I don't know how many square meters that is, but it's really huge. And they want to have food startups in there producing foods and thinking about foods and making research and making trade ideas and so on. And it's not even open, but it's already booked completely. So because you see that there's a huge mass of people thinking in this food direction, and this is totally neglected in many ways. So this is something I'm totally pumped for.
Love that. Any good resources to learn about it? Like, are there any thought leaders or podcasts about sort of the rejuvenation and new tech food industry?
I would put something together if you like and send you an email, or and then publish.
You got it. Ingo, what an epi, man. Really appreciate it. And you have an open invite for round 2 anytime you like. Truly a great episode and learned a ton. And again, you guys are building something that is not something, we'll use it when it's ready. We need this shit now. So love you and the team for doing that. Before we let you go, can you please let our listeners know where they can find you and KILT online and on socials?
So very, very easy, actually. It's kilt.io. Find us in kilt.io. There you find all the social links that you need to find us, to find me. Also on Twitter, it's at KILT Protocol, one word. So also easy to find. And everything else you find on kilt.io.
Amazing. Ingo, thanks a lot for coming on, man. Really, really fun. Learned a ton and can't wait for the next time.
Thank you very much.
Folks, what an episode with Ingo Rübe from KILT Protocol. These guys are creating the blockchain identity protocol, a true identity infrastructure, and they will change the game. So pumped to have Ingo on. What an episode. He was dropping knowledge bombs left, right, and center. If you guys enjoyed this, and I really hope you did, please do subscribe. It would mean the world to my team, and I love the team. Thank you so much for everything, guys. And to the listeners, love you guys. Keep on growing those bags and keep on staying healthy, wealthy, and happy. Bye for now. Enjoy your holidays, and we'll chat soon. All the best.